thing I'm noticing a lot more than in years past is the amount of apples that have been pecked away by blackbirds in particular. You usually get a few, but not as many as there's been this year. Right across this apple tree. And this either means that the apples this year are much further on than normal at this time of year, or it means that food is scarce, and I would not have thought that considering the amount of food that is here, unless the blackbirds are stocking up and preparing for a long winter. I'm not sure what the explanation is. Certainly there's a lot more damage here than there's been in the past. Hello, welcome back to the Far North Food Forest, and today I start with a question. What makes a pioneer? What makes them do the extraordinary things that they do? What drives them to be the first? To care not what others may think, but to strive on regardless and achieve the things that they achieve. Are you a pioneer? What made you a pioneer? How did you start? What was the driving force behind the things that you did? When we first thought about doing this sort of thing, we were in the midst of maybe what to some may appear like a perfect life. We had 3 small children. I had a job for the civil service. My wife was quite happy doing the things that she was doing with her artwork and her home life. But for me at that time, and for both of us, we realised that that wasn't the life that we had really desired to do when we were young. Nothing had driven inside of us when we were young to think, oh yes, great, I could work in a civil service office, work in a job centre, be a staff trainer, be a deputy manager. No, that wasn't what I wanted to do at all. My wife wanted to have a small holding. I wanted to have a safari park and grow trees. Eventually, the situation got to the stage where I was hardly seeing our children at night, and if I did see them, I was so drained that I wasn't enjoying the experience as much as I could have been. But I wasn't seeing my wife as much as I wanted to either, which was really the point of being married in the first place. That was maybe the beginning of that drive to be something that I really wanted to be, a drive inside me to do what I wanted to do, what we wanted to do as a family. And it meant making some difficult choices, moving away from Cornwall. In the United Kingdom, many people spend all their lives saving up to live in Cornwall. But our drive was to have this small holding, or a safari park, or grow trees. And so eventually, things became difficult mentally for me, and following a sort of a stress breakdown, we decided we needed to change. And so we moved almost 1,000 miles north to what is the most northerly village on the mainland in the UK. to here, to a small holding. And for once, actually, you're looking north. So that is north. And just beyond the horizon there is the sea, Orkney Islands, and a lot of our weather comes from over there as well as from the west, which is at the moment that direction. Now we have another impending storm. It's October the 2nd. It's Thursday. It hasn't reached us yet. We're expecting some rain first, and then we're going to have some winds, possibly 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. So again, our food forest here, if you've followed us before, you'll have seen some of the storm pictures of our Croft food forest and what happened, and how the forest actually protected the inner part of the area where we grow our food, where we have our apple trees and our fruit bushes and our veggies and perennials and so on. But back to my initial question, what makes a pioneer? How did we start? I mean, for us, maybe there was more than just, that desire to start up something more than the civil service life, the sort of life that you see in maybe many pensioners' faces that was like, oh, I wish I'd done something different, or maybe the life you see in everyday faces of, I'm stuck in the system, but I'm comfortable here. And I'm not saying that the life of 9 to 5 and the life of bringing up children and helping them grow, go to school and do all those things is not the life that we should be leading. But for us, it wasn't. And so we took it upon ourselves to move here, as I say, 1,000 miles north, and begin this small holding life. In fact, a lot of our early days began right here. When I think about it, just around this pond. So at the moment, we're actually not in a part of the food forest that you've seen before. Pond area here, the pond used to be twice the size it is now, and at the moment it's dried up because our ditches have got filled up with willows that have fallen and reeds that have started to grow in there. So we're going to have to do some digging around there. I can't do the digging at the moment. I said to you before, I have CRPS, which stops me doing anything excessively physical for very long at all. And sometimes I can't do anything. But we do have 1 or 2 children here still with us, and they help us out, do some of the more physical things that we need to do. So this pond right behind us here used to be twice this size, but it was the beginning. We had a few ducks in the pond that were left here, so I built a little duck house, which you may or may not be able to see there hidden in the trees, which is still there after 23 years. We also built a little chicken house on the edge here, and fenced it in, and we bought 6 Black Rock chickens. Black Rocks were supposed to be a dual-purpose chicken that at the end of their laying lives would be able to be fit for eating. They used to lay eggs every day. They were quite hardy, so we get an egg a day, or 6 eggs if all of them were laying. And that first egg, it was worth £10,000, £20,000 a year, or £30,000 or £40,000 a year. It was just an amazing thing to see our first egg, and ever after we were connected with the self-sufficient life, which led to us having a food forest here. I have to say that Black Rock chickens don't taste that good after 6 or 7 years of laying, so I'm not sure I would recommend them as being an all-round chicken. I'm not sure, but you need to get some chickens that are a little bit more faster growing, maybe with a bit of Indian game in there or something like that. But back to the pioneers. So I've been fascinated not just with our pioneer life, but what drove us to this pioneer life was and not a desire to be different, maybe a desire to find what was us. And maybe that drove you also. Maybe your best friend was not actually a person, it was an animal or a tree or a plant or something, and maybe you didn't get on with people particularly well. Maybe you were bullied at school. Maybe that was the driving force, to just get away from people altogether. And maybe that was part of us. It was more that we didn't really fit in or hadn't found our niche yet. And for those that become self-sufficient, the niche isn't one individual thing. It's not a specific thing that fits into the system where you specialize in an area and fit into society, and you either become a specialist, a doctor or a mechanic or a plumber or something, and fit into society. Pioneers, self-sufficient individuals, become specialized generalists, if there is such a thing. You do lots of things, so we did lots of things. So we used our art and our writing skills, so I became a bit of a writer. Rebecca was already an artist, and she did a lot more of that, as well as having businesses that we had, making soaps and balms from herbs that we grew here. So we became, or discovered, that we were pioneers. We weren't afraid of what came ahead of us, to do something different. In fact, we were more afraid to fit into the crowd than we were to stand out from the crowd. That didn't matter. When we first came here, you could see the locals looking at us like, oh, here we go, here's another set of English individuals with their four-wheel drive, only to go home in a year's time with a wheelbarrow and their tails between their legs, as it were. I mean, we arrived here with a camper van and a lorry with a small pony in, and a few cats, to a place that was derelict of any life at all. It had been grazed with animals, so they couldn't grow here, because there was nothing for them to eat. There were no trees here apart from one or two that were close to the house, which at that time resembled a wallow that you might expect a hippo or various pigs, or even water buffaloes. And water buffaloes tells me, that's a story I need to tell you about later on, water buffaloes. But yeah, the place was derelict in many ways. The house was okay, but outside the barns were full of manure. The cesspit had exploded. The ground, as I said, was barren. There were lots of reeds, or various reeds, or heather, or nothing. So we had a lot to do to change the land that we're in. And we did do. But those that saw us at first and saw us with our pony and trying to dig ditches and grow things, and I can remember almost seeing a smirk on people's faces as we grew our first little herb patch. But we were excited by the fact that we'd done that. And 23 years later, we didn't go home with a wheelbarrow and our tail between our legs. We carried on and experimented and built what for me is probably one of the most northerly food forests on the UK mainland. And if you look at where Caithness is in terms of the world, we're sort of in line with parts of maybe Scandinavia and maybe Canada on the other side. We're that far north. But I've been fascinated by pioneers for some time. And because I worked in the area of growing, I was interested in the plant collectors. Those guys that went out, in the Regency period, sort of late 18th century, early 19th century, the 1780s and 90s of Joseph Banks, who of course was there when they discovered Botany Bay in Australia, where Sydney is now, and they named it Botany Bay because of all the botany that they did, the things that they discovered, the plants they discovered. I think they were going to call it something like Stingray Bay because of all the stingrays that were there. I'm not at all interested in the colonialisation that happened there, which is in some ways a sadder story. But I'm interested in how the plants were collected, what drove those plant collectors to do what they did, the dangers that they went through. They were like the ancient sort of gold diggers of their time, went off into pioneer areas that were unsafe, where there was no law. And people were like, let's say, Joseph Banks in Australia, of course, but even more so, people like David Douglas, thinking of one of the best plant collectors, or the most famous, certainly in Scotland, who discovered the Douglas fir. Of course, he didn't discover it because the natives had already seen it, but for him, the Douglas fir and many of the giant redwoods and things like that then must have been stunning when it come from the relatively small growing trees of Europe. That first thing that drove him on to find new plants. When he was sent out from Kew Gardens, which was growing at that time, the Horticultural Society was growing. I suppose George the Third, or George the Fourth, depending on when you're thinking about it. Of course, George the Third had his problems, and he had the Prince Regent then who'd come in. That sort of period was where horticulture was beginning to grow, and there was an excitement about getting things from different parts of the world and growing them. But of course, the problems were that they couldn't get overseas, bring them back from overseas in any great capacity. A lot of them died on the ships coming back home. Maybe 2 or 5% of plants lived, of all the ones that the great plant collectors collected. But it's because of them that we have some of the fruit, some of the trees, some of the perennials, the flowers that we have today that were brought from all over the world, from places as far away as China and Japan, from Canada. These great pioneers, the things that they did. I mean, David Douglas himself, people tried to shoot at him. The natives, those that he didn't mix with or couldn't barter with. I mean, they were great barterers, a lot of the American Indians then. Those that he couldn't barter with, tried to kill him. He was almost drowned several times, if not shipwrecked, almost got swallowed in a whirlpool, was chased by grizzly bears, eventually had a fairly grisly death, I understand, in a pit that was there to capture animals. Many people were jealous of him and the things that he did when he took the plants back home to England. So, and he didn't enjoy his time, I don't think, amongst the rich set in England. I think he wanted to be out there in the world, finding new plants, discovering the ways that they lived, how they pollinated, how they propagated, how they lived as a whole, the things that they did for the environment, how they worked as companions with other plants, the trees that he saw, the animals that he saw. These were just amazing things to people like David Douglas, that kept him going, kept him striving forward. And for me, it's what drives me forward. More recently, I've been reading the books of Edward Stepp. Now, Edward Stepp, I think he was more sort of a Victorian era. I wrote books that covered sort of 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. In fact, his books were so important, I believe they actually put them in reprint during the war even. Edward Stepp, went out into his local area, what they used to call the wayside. So he would go off and wander along the side roads, across the moors, and see what plants were growing, see what animals were alive, see what the ecosystem was. And he went on various rambles around the country to see what plants were alive and do the botany, just discover what plants were, had they been discovered, had they been already categorized and catalogued in the Linnaeus system, or the Linnaeus system. Had they already been seen? What was happening then? How did they interact? I'm interested in those books, those sort of almost delicate books then, when society was maybe a little bit slower and you could do things like that. And he wrote a series called Nature Rambles, which covered, all the seasons and what he saw in the seasons. And I hope to do that here. Obviously, we're very different. Edward Stepp was down in the south of England. We're up the far north of Scotland. But I'm interested to see what plants are alive that he saw then, that I can rediscover here. And something I'd like to do before we leave here, if we have to leave, either because I'm no longer able to look after the forest here, or if we want to adventure elsewhere, whichever happens, I'd like to catalogue what we grow here now, what grows wild here, what trees we've grown, what fruit trees are growing, and catalogue that. And just, I'm not going to be pinning things as the old naturalists used to do. I'm not going to be pinning anything to books like butterflies and things like that, but I think I'll allow things to grow as I look at them. But the work that they did then was so important. The categorizing and cataloguing helps us understand so much of how things grow today and how we can propagate and pollinate and produce things that can produce a lot of the food that we grow now that helps so many people around the world in areas where they have no food, or through either climate change or just their general area doesn't give them the capacity to be able to grow things, and we can now produce fruit that will provide for them. So I'm interested in the self-reliance aspect, the pioneering aspect. So are you a pioneer? What do you do? What have you discovered about yourself? I suppose pioneering is not necessarily just growing trees, plants. You can be a pioneer in your own field. You can go out, break out on your own and discover things. And I don't know, take courage in your hands and not mind too much about what others say, and just strive for something that really drives you in your heart and helps you discover who you are and helps discover things that will help the future. So once more, we're going to be pioneering, the sense that we're going to have this storm facing us in the next few hours. I say I believe we're going to get some really stiff winds. In fact, I think they maybe originate down with the hurricanes that they're getting in the south of South America, joining up with the jet stream, pushing things up here that eventually ends up with storms over here with us in the far north of Scotland, which might be 90-mile-per-hour storms. But it's interesting to see how things are joined, how we are joined with other countries around the world, not just with their weather systems, but now obviously with the plants that we grow and the animals that we see. So that's a little bit of a short story in how we became pioneers and how we'll continue to be pioneers in pushing forward the idea of a food forest. There are great things that happen up here in the north of Scotland. I'm sure you'll see many of the rewilding projects that are up here, animals that have been reintroduced, the idea of lynx or wolves being reintroduced, which I've got my own thoughts on. And rewilding in itself is a great idea. We do need to help the native wildlife regrow here. The pollinators, that will help as well. But I'm also, pro being able to live in the area that you live in. So I'm hoping that we can also introduce you to why there are things that maybe I don't entirely agree with rewilding because I think we need to help. I mean, one of the things that we did when we came up here and we wanted to grow what was a self-reliant area then was also help the wildlife grow at the same time with us. We wanted to grow an ecosystem. So it wasn't just about us, it was about the ecosystem that we have here. The ecosystem has changed as such, and you may have watched previous videos of us. It's grown such that we have so many birds here now that now we have predators that have come in. So this ecosystem has grown into having birds of prey here, such as unfortunately not the golden eagle yet, but we do have a lot of various predators. We have a barn owl that's here. We have a hen harrier that's here at the moment, which is interesting to see. We have a kestrel that's here. And recently we've had unknown birds of prey up here, which we're not sure if they were hen harriers or something else that has come in and joined us too. So I'm not going to give anything away because I'm going to put that in maybe one of our next videos. There are a pair of a certain bird of prey, maybe you can guess, that have moved in and are working here as well at the moment. It's great also to adapt to the environment we're into. So we don't want to change the environment. So when you come here to the far north of Scotland, you may want it to change. You may want to do certain things that just, for example, there are some that don't want to have a fence at the front of their land. They want to have it open to the elements and everything else, the wildlife. But of course, the wildlife will come in and eat your plants if you're not careful. So you do have to put up fences and so on. So we're doing some of that at the moment. So we're fencing off some of our area by the pond so we can grow more perennials in here and maybe some trees. Fencing off our ponies because however much you love a pony, and we use the manure for our ponies in our raised beds, so we are using that. You don't want them to eat your perennials, which they will do, as will sheep or the deer. We have roe deer here. So you have to adapt and realise there are things that you can't do in a certain area. But that didn't include growing trees. We were told we couldn't grow trees, and we thought you could. We saw enough in the peatlands around here to know that trees must have grown before, and enough growing in the environment to see that trees could be grown. And of course, we've used the trees to protect perennials and fruit trees and so on in the middle of our fruit forest. And they cut down the amount of wind that we get in the centre, cut down our heating bills because of it. And they offer so much life, so much insect life has come from them. And of course, then bird life comes in, amphibians come in. That's mainly what we have in our pond now. And I suppose part of the sort of permaculture system is to have your water in the centre of your permaculture setup. It's not quite in the centre, but we do have smaller ponds that are in and around our food forest that help the amphibian life and therefore cut down on the slugs. We have some of our tree life that we allow to just die off into the areas that they're based, and so we get more insect life, more beetle life, which also will eat the slugs as well. But we do still get plenty of slugs, and we have to use our own methods to get rid of those, which might include giving them to the chickens that we have that also help with our general setup here. Anyway, I've talked enough. This video was about pioneering. So are you pioneers? If you are, get in touch with us. Let us know what you're doing. Are you up in Caithness? Are you a pioneer? We'd love to hear from you. And maybe we could come and film some of the things that you're doing. Are you a pioneer in your own country? Are you a pioneer in the things that you do? You struck out on your own for one reason or another. We're interested to hear from you. So looking through at Edward Stepp's Nature Rambles, this Come With Me series of books, autumn to winter, and just flicking through onto one of the first pictures in here, we can see number 3 there, cat's ear, long-rooted cat's ear. Here we go, this looks pretty similar. It's one of the group of composites that's in the sort of large and dandelion hawkweed sort of family. Yeah, that looks very much like it to me. course, it also mentions in here firs. Now firs, in this case dwarf firs, which comes earlier in the year, means that over there, which is gorse. So the old gorse bush there has also been known as firs. This time of year, as I say, it's not flowering as he's got it in his book here, but the dwarf version does. Well, we haven't got the dwarf version, we've just got these huge big ones. But interesting again to see. Nature Rambles, Edward's Step, is even applicable up here in Scotland, and even applicable nearly 100 years after he first wrote it. And one of the next flowers that we come to is number 4 there, Devil's Bit Scabious. And if I look amongst the reeds here, there it is. Some Devil's Bit Scabious. So maybe the more similarities in our little garden than I thought to Edward's Step in the south of England. Nice.